Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have an exciting presentation lined up for you with a very interesting presenter and customer who's been using our product structure for quite some time. And he's been using that both in its on-prem fashion and now more recently the cloud platform. So he brings a rather unique and interesting perspective that I think many of you may be interested in. So today's topic is agility in cybersecurity and how to keep things structured. Our guest is Nathaniel Elliott from Dragos. I'm going to introduce him further in just a moment. But let's go over some of the basic rules of engagement, if you will, for today's presentation. So we have a very simple agenda. There will be an introduction, of course, which is what we're doing right now, a quick, and then not quick necessarily, but Nathaniel's presentation. And most importantly, the Q&A session. That's really where the meat of the learning takes place, I think. We certainly have a great presentation from our presenter today, but it's the questions that you ask and taking advantage of the opportunity to learn more that I think benefits all of us. Next slide. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will keep attendee microphones muted today for obvious reasons to reduce the back down noise of barking dogs, crying babies, screaming ambulances, and so forth. And we'll ask you, all of you, to use the Q&A feature that's you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So as a question occurs to you, whether it's a question for our guest presenter, Nathaniel, or a question for ALM Works, just go ahead and submit that question as we go, as you're thinking of it. We're going to hold the questions until the end of the presentation, and I'll read the questions to Nathaniel at that time. But we suggest you write them down as we go. I'll also mention briefly that Nathaniel has a couple of informal questions in his presentation today, but rather than use the platform's survey feature, we're just going to ask folks to informally use the hand raise feature at the bottom of your screen and answer to Nathaniel's questions. I'll keep an eye on the responses and let Nathaniel know what the responses are. So when we get to those questions, just raise your hand to indicate whether you agree or disagree. Raise your hand if you agree with the statement or the question that's being posed. And then finally, just to remind everyone, this is being recorded. We hope that doesn't prevent you from asking questions. You can ask questions anonymously if you wish. But the reason we record the session is that we share it for posterity on our YouTube channel, so that you can share it with colleagues. Folks who signed up for the webinar but at the last minute were unable to attend can still find it and see it. There's a lot of good reasons why we do that. So without further ado, let's introduce Nathaniel. So as I mentioned earlier, Nathaniel's an interesting presenter, I feel, today because of his experience and background with Jira and with our product, which is called Structure, if you didn't already know that. He's a senior product manager at Dragos, where he manages both cross-team program management and the implementation of agile practices for the company's engineering departments. He's been doing this sort of work for 10 years in a variety of industries, including healthcare, publishing, and consulting services. So he brings a wide array of experience to today's presentation. Moreover, Nathaniel is a longtime Jira user, and he's been doing this sort of thing for most of those 10 years. So again, there's a lot of expertise here that you can take advantage of today. And he's also, as I mentioned at the beginning today, been a Structure user for some time, both in its on-prem instantiation and more recently the cloud version of Structure. So he brings a lot of interesting perspectives to the table. And without further ado, let's turn it over to Nathaniel and let him start his portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm truly excited about this. Just one quick note. I've actually only known Jira for about 3.5, 4 years. But ALM tools in general, from TFS when it was first to VSTS to Azure, I've gotten to use many ALM tools, and that's the fun part. And by the way, I do like Jira. Not always, because there's some hard things with it, but that's, I think, where Structure comes into play. It makes it usable for us, at least as a individual consultant and contributor, as well as for companies that are utilizing it, like Dragos, where I am today. And so what I want to talk through, Dave did a great job doing an introduction, but why? Why did we look at structure? What was it about Atlassian's kind of holistic view of how they built their platform that we needed to increase capabilities of? And for us, that focus came into visibility and predictability. And this has kind of been a common theme for most of the organizations I have worked with, especially as they are making a transition to Agile and less of a phase gate approach, is how do we mix this ability of agility and what I like to say is true project management, remembering that there are things that come from PMP 101 and things of that nature that do enhance what we can see in the visibility and how we predict things, while utilizing the philosophies of agility in this manner. So what we have done on Jira is say, hey, how do we do this? And for us, after looking at many tools and plugins and wanting our why to be visibility and predictability, we ended up choosing to go with structure across other options that are out there. But for us, in the kind of ever-changing realm of the cyber threats that are happening, for us, this is a really smooth way to affect change in our organization. And I also want to say, learn from. You're going to see a constant theme through this, that we are trying things, we're working through processes, and we're iterating on them continually. And even today, we have an individual or two individuals from the organization here who may not have even seen this presentation. And the reason we do these things is to be agile, to get ourselves out there, and to learn from other people. And so while we go through this presentation, I would love the questions to also come, or comments about areas you think we could do it better or that you've seen better so that we can improve. And Dave knows that, and the team knows that I've talked to about this. So what does this mean for Dragos? And what is Dragos? I'm going to go in a little more depth about that in a second. But what is this? So the whole idea here is we want to implement agility so that teams can run in a Kanban, a Scrum, or whatever form of Agile they're running, but be able to report up, right? Report where we're going, how the organization is doing with a release, with a feature, or things of that nature. And not every team is the same. And I hate to say this, but we are still trying. And I think most organizations are still trying to allow those teams to have their special ways to do it, while also finding a way to bring it all together and report out so that developers or quality engineers or other individual contributors don't have to spend time doing status updates or sharing where things are, so that we don't have to keep asking about predictability. And so no matter what we do, we really need to see a holistic image of the work that's going on, no matter the size of the company as well. And I think most of you all would agree with that. So the two questions I would like to start with, because this will help gauge for me how to speak during this. Dave gave a great point that these things will help kind of help our dialogue go the right way. So two fun questions for you. How many are scaling their agile approaches, and how many are using cloud version of Atlassian or even structure right now? So in your boxes, Dave is going to be taking that with a hand raise, but I am curious how many people are trying to scale agile and how many people are using cloud. So let's start with question one, Dave. How many people are scaling their agile approaches? While those hands are raised, and I see them popping up here on the left, I do want to tell you just a quick moment about Dragos. So Dragos is a cybersecurity organization that works with IIoT World, right, which is our industrial control systems for ICS, where we have a goal of safeguarding civilization. So we're looking at the electrical grid and saying, where are things and their weaknesses, and giving opportunity for them to have that same type of visibility we're talking about here with even a tool like structure, but obviously in a much more complex way. So I see 6 or so people are saying that they're scaling their agile approaches. So the term scaled agile framework probably makes sense, or Nexus from Scrum. And we could talk lightly about those, but when I say scale agile, I mean, we have more than one dev team. And many of you guys probably have more than one dev team. And you need to see holistically across those. And that's what we're going after. The next question is, how many are you using the cloud version of Atlassian? Okay.
Looks like it's going to be about half the audience again.
I like it. Okay, so half are on cloud, half are on-prem. Great points to bring up. And so while I'm talking about some of these things, some of you may not have this functionality. I'll call it out because I've actually been blessed to have the use of both on-prem and cloud and the benefits to both. So we can talk through that. And also, I believe Dave can probably talk to their roadmap and how they're increasing some cloud capabilities as well. So for Dragos, we're a cybersecurity company that does not work on your average things. We're working with the electrical grid, the oil, water, and such to make sure that you and I's electricity are such, even during this webinar, are up and going. And that's what our job is. And so we have a beautiful system, product, and a monthly system that goes out that gives updates called Knowledge that give content to this system. But how do you track both the content that we're delivering and the platform as a whole to make sure that everything is going the way it should be and that we're delivering on time, on budget, and in what the customer needs most importantly? Well, we follow some of the parts of a scaled agile approach to do that. And we're using structure to gain that structure to align with kind of the team view, the program view, and the portfolio view that you would see normally in a scaled agile approach. And so for us, the teams are aligned in projects and work really closely as component teams and feature teams with the other groups in the organization. And so you're going to see two slides at the bottom. And don't worry, the next slide I go to actually will bring up these in a larger picture after we talk about how we do it. So what I want to talk about here is we want the teams to see how they're doing and utilize structure in the ways that they find beneficial. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways they have found very tactically. At the program and portfolio level for me as a project manager, I need to be able to roll up everything that's going on and understand where we are progress-wise, where we are with our releases, where we are with our targets, story points, and able to see, again, that holistic view versus just silos, and the team should be able to see that too. So what is structure, right? I realize some people on this call may not fully understand what structure is, and so I want to point that out. Structure allows us to bring with JQL, pre-made filters or projects, and bring all of the data in a structured view where we can set what is inserted, how we extend it, so you can insert epics and extend them to see all the subtasks or user stories underneath of it. And these are all things you can set up and customize for your own use, which allows us, for me, to do this at Dragos. And what are some of those example structures that I'm going to talk through with you guys tactically that we utilize? So and I put an X in front of these because these are agnostic, but we have release management structures where we have all of our epics broken down to the features or user stories and bugs. We have that for each of our releases. In each of those structures, and I'm going to talk about building these in a second too, we have a structure called bug management. We have one called governance. We have one called release closeout. Some teams, like our front-end team, have their own structures that allow them to see how things are groomed and manage their grooming process. Other feature teams use this in a way for building out their feature and their functional testing versus unit testing. And last but not least, I personally use it too to manage my own backlog of work that I have in Jira across my teams because of how my team is structured. My team has product owners, our technical writers, and they are obviously cross-functional as well. And we want to have insight on where things are and where our bottlenecks land. So what does this look like? Here's the expanded image. If we were looking at a release, what I have here, and I'm going to take out an annotation with a laser pointer. Let's have some fun. Right here is our release management. And this is what I was speaking about at a high level. We have multiple of these that have automation that pull in each of the tickets automatically by, again, using JQL as our preference or a filter that we can control externally. What you'll see over here is all of the epics that are coming in. And you're going to see a feature here. If you didn't know, our coloring is the same of Jira out of the box. So purple for epics, orange for features, green for stories. And what we have here is the ability to then see across the organization how groups are doing within each of these epics, agnostic of the project. So we're able to see the progress, both by bar and progress percentage. We're also able to see the release version it's going to be in, and I can talk through how we utilize that, and the targeted version. The next thing that you're going to see, and I apologize that it doesn't slide perfectly between these two, is what I call RM baselines. What this is our roadmap to see everything in the organization and make sure that nothing is off of our baseline universally for what we're delivering. And what you can see here is our story points. They're the roll-up of what we see, the progress. But one other interesting thing from a project management perspective is I'm also able to see when these items are done or will be planned to be done. So if you're part of a scaled agile approach, there's probably some time when you have a big room planning. And I'm going to be honest, we just did a new one of these for ourselves in our own way. And we are building this out actively. So we have a new view that has all of the new feature and all the stories across all the teams. Plus, they've aligned them to the different sprints they're going to deliver them in so that we can see and make sure accountability occurs between data contracts or such for the organization, not just for the development teams, but we also can do this for project teams, your product owners, your scrum masters, your engineer managers. So we're able to really see that predictability, see that visibility across the organization and how things are progressing against the plan we originally had. Remember, it was a plan when we started, not just this is written in stone, because we are agile and we do need to get customer feedback and we do need to iterate. So this visibility allows us to have structure in how we handle things. Now, there is, I thought, one more slide, and I apologize, folks. So the other component on here I wanted to show or talk through is how I use it personally, right? How could you use this so that people think out of the box tactically? Personally, I have all of my user stories or tasks that are assigned to me that I'm working on across all the different teams, from project management to reports for KPIs to my weekly readouts that I have to do. That allows me to see with my manager a priority list of the things agnostic of which project they are in so that we can prioritize on the fly what I have going on. Why is this important to you? I don't know how many of the people on this call wear multiple hats, but I assume I'm not the only one. And it's very nice to be able to say to your executive leadership, here's what I have across everything. Here is what I have and what I think the best rank order is, because I can adjust it. What do I think? How is it? And I can show that on the fly without having to do anything personally to demonstrate that. I bring up my structure and I'm able to walk through these different steps. So we're going to go to the next two questions. How many people are trying new processes? And I'm going to do this question together. And how many people are willing to try new ideas? So everyone raise your hand and let me know if you would do any of these things.
So I'll keep an eye on the count. It looks like we're exceeding half the audience this time.
Oh, we are. So since you guys are raising
nearly the whole
hands,
audience, in fact. Yeah.
Okay, so that means we have most people listening. So since you guys are an awesome group listening, can you do me one more favor and say right now, can you ask one question thus far, just so that we have those questions part of it that you have seen thus far, tactically, how I've done something? I'm happy to talk through that. Or theory-wise, what you're curious about. Just ask Dave one question so that at the end you have not forgotten. That'd be wonderful. And I do see go on here. I know a couple of you, Steve, I know you're on here. So I'm going to say, hey, help me out. Oh, Christine Chrome, welcome. All right, so how do we do this? We want to make sure that we have eyes on the ticket, right? So setting this up once doesn't deliver value. Setting this up once and knowing that it is up to date through the process is where the value comes, because it gives you visibility and it gives you predictability into what you're doing. So for me, this is one of the examples. I'm able to go back and look at a full release however I want and see the roll-up of story points, how many iterations it took, what the average area and bug count back occurred, right? So I can say, hey, this release had this is how many bugs, this is how many story points. And one comment, I look forward to when Structure allows you to export, or maybe it's a functionality that I need to learn about, but export this view into Excel. It would be idealistic. Yes, I still love Excel because I know how to solve problems with it quickly. So that's bugs and governance. The second thing is teams need to have a full view of what they're building. How often do we get so siloed into one area that we forget architecturally or from a process flow where and how things are going to build up to the bigger picture for our customer, right? The value delivery is in how we deliver to the customer, not just in accomplishing the task. And I think often when we see project management, we also start quickly adjusting and saying, oh my gosh, this didn't get done. But the real question is, does it matter as well? So the teams need to have a full view of this to be able to make those judgment calls. So we, as project managers, or my product owners, or even our product management team and product team that is brilliant, can see where things are and judge both rank order, priority, how large items are, how things are built out, and make calls on the fly. Again, remembering that it also means that this data has to be up to date, and the data is only as good as what you put into it. And that's where, again, the first point of the bugs and governance becomes so crucial to how you do this. So now we've said, hey, teams have the full view. But what about dependencies or ad hoc requests? How do we manage those? Because I'm sure if I asked for a raise of hands, how many people's projects or agile things go over? And what I mean by over is they're not delivered fully when you expected or wanted them to, right? So that dependency management becomes so crucial so quick because I need to see what items are blocked or being blocked. What are the story point counts? What sprint are they going to be done in? And you can't do that out of the box with Jira easily. So one of the areas that I wanted to demonstrate was how we do release dependency. We have two folders. So when you are creating your structure, you're able to embed or add items. You're able to create your automations or manually just add an issue or create folders. One of the ways that some of the teams taught me, which I thought was very cool, was this folder structure of blocked versus blocking with a very simple JQL run. And for those who, I assume everyone on here knows what JQL is, but your search capabilities in Jira, I'm able to quickly say any tickets that are blocked or any tickets that are blocking, I'm able to see a visibility. And if you know what a scrum of scrums is or your product owner sync, these are great opportunities to bring up these tickets and say, hey, when is this going to be accomplished? Why? Because, and I'm going to jump across. Oh, no, I don't have it. Why? In two more slides, I'm going to show you with the roll in a little closer to say, I also know when those blocked or blocking items will be released because they're also putting them into sprints ahead of time so that I can fully understand. So again, this is the release management. It shows all the teams across the org and how we're handling them. Then the release closeout. Well, we talked about governance. We talked about all of the custom fields that teams may use or release version / fixed version. We haven't touched on fully, but there are a lot of custom fields that people love to play with and to orchestrate their work around. Well, how do you make sure all of these things align so that when you push a button to say this is released, you know everything that is in it? So we have also created structures that show all the bugs, all the targeted versus fixed version and such to make sure that we orchestrate ourselves and have double and triple checks versus exporting everything into Excel and managing it from there. The other note is we are hoping that this will help us with release notes moving forwards too, because we have the ability to make sure that our custom fields for release notes are added as a column. If you notice, each of these columns that I have on here are different. We set up different views for different columns to demonstrate different items for the different audiences. and teams do this as well. So how do we make those columns consistent? We don't, right? So the fun part here is I and the team that I run, we build out those major release tickets, release structures that I shared earlier. We kind of name them and we have our naming convention. Now, when you go in to manage your structures, you'll see all of the items listed that we have. Sometimes it gets a little convoluted to sort those and understand who owns what, but we always make sure that views are saved for the different structures we set up so that, again, no one needs to manually talk through updates on tickets, but instead can use out-of-the-box functionality that is part of Jira with the addition of structure to say, hey, story points. What is the roll-up right now of all the story points for this? Which allows us to compare two features against each other and say, is this right? Which then product can come in and say, you know what, did you think about or did you ask? Then engineering is able to say, well, I could do this in this next 2 sprints or those 2 sprints. Here's the rank order that I think is best. And we're able to have those dialogues. And I just want to speak on one component. Do we do it perfectly? No. And I want to be very clear in that because I think a lot of times you'll have people that do webinars speak about how perfectly these things go. They don't talk about the truth. We are still continually trying new ways of doing these things. We're still trying to understand better ways of how we do it and structure things to allow teams to be agile while also giving insight onto really where things are. So that goes into progress. We have 2 different progress bars and columns set up. One reads off of status category. One reads off of status. And we rate those differently. This is a custom ability you can do when you're doing this. Again, I don't show things that are in progress right now. I should have, I apologize. But these items don't always match. Why? Because progress and progress are built off of 2 different fields for us, because that is how we found it valuable. Next, sprints. Yes, we think about the sprints for the whole year, and we allow teams to set them up so that we know when accountability occurs, we can see what happens. These are all saved in your views. I realize I can't pull this back, but you can save this as your default views for your customers that are coming in to review. So for me, my customers are engineering, product, R&D, and most of our VP leadership, and we want to make sure that we can go over it. And my other customer is all the agile teams who are running Scrum, Kanban, or whatever, who are also giving input and advice, right? How do I get to use even this example of being agile? I get to use this video to explain how we use structure, right? There's many ways that we can just keep using little steps forwards to make it happen. The other component is linked issues. We really like having on this view all the linked issues and associated issues with it. Yes, we have the hierarchy, but what about all the other items that might be connected to it? So we use that a lot. And then obviously assignee. Can't really go wrong with assignee. Who's working on this? Or project team is another one that we like a lot. Some fields are editable here, which makes it really nice. So you can update on the fly your story points. You can double click, adjust your story points, or add a sprint to it. But some fields are not. And that is a differentiator between being on the server on-prem versus the cloud. And one of the interesting changes that I found going from more marketing-based organization to cybersecurity to help lead project management and product owners, that transition was different. But those capabilities are coming and are continually being worked on. And it hasn't stopped us from getting a lot of value. Instead, it has done quite the opposite. What it has allowed us to do is set things up consistently so that we can have teams utilize this as a view. Again, for visibility and predictability. If you remember from one of the first slides, that was my main focus. So what is the difference between these on-prem to cloud, though? What are those open areas? As we were doing and getting ready for this webinar, one of the main focal points that I really liked about talking with ALM Work, and actually some of the consulting firms that use them and are some of their partners, I believe. The area that comes in is they're very quick to work with their customers on these things. And yet, right, there's always a counter. When I was at previous company doing more marketing-based work, there was ability to update sorting. And this sorting allows you to rank order, select multiple items, drag them up, and change how the rank is ordering. This is coming. It's not here yet. But that was one of the kind of hard things in the very beginning. But we've actually realized that some of the out-of-the-box solutions that Jira offers work just as well because the product owners have the ability to manage that backlog for us. Editing inline all columns. I know that not all columns are, and this actually relates to the updating sorting. So I'm sure Dave can speak to a lot of this as well. And then changing link types, which actually also involves sorting. So to be clear, what other tools are we utilizing or taking advantage of that make structure do what we need to do? None. We actually don't have many because we don't want to do that, right? We've played around with plans, script runners on everyone's Jira instance. Draw.io is the normal way that people utilize in Confluence, form, diagrams, and such. But really, security is essential. And when we did our search with them, we were able to talk about it, and it was one of those great opportunities for us. So what I want to then say is, why does this all matter? Not every team is the same, right? And for us, setting up a hierarchy, creating a structure that allows us to see one team plus the other team in one cohesive view, see how they're story pointing. And by the way, yes, not all story points align. So what does that mean for us? Again, it's a view. It is not telling us perfection. It is telling us the best information that we have already in Jira, that within Jira we can't get to. But within structure, we're able to see the roll-up of those story points and the views to make things really seamless for dependency management and tracking. And we want that visibility so that teams can understand, again, that North Star, where they want to go, how they want to predict for their own accountability so that they can deliver upon that. And these insights allow us to really aim towards data-driven decisions, not just feeling. And not just making sure that every person is in every meeting, because that gets overwhelming. You can't get updates from everyone every time, every moment. It doesn't work. And sometimes there's miscommunication when there's conversations happening. So for example, one of the fields that we brought over is a status update field. There's a status update field on our tickets, which then allow us to see in structure the latest status of how things are going from a developer, or for the feature, or for the epic. The product owner is able to do that, or the developer is at the end of the day. And we can run reports on that so that our executive leaders and teams can see the holistic picture. So why do we do it again? Visibility into all the projects. I, as a project manager, really do need to be able to see projects, break them down into projects when it is a project versus a feature or a release, understand where impediments are. Plus, I really want to see a hierarchy because not everyone wants to see every subtask that a developer is doing or the QE is doing. And not every team needs to understand the initiative that we've gone into, right? So the initiative for X may not always matter fully to a developer, but they should be able to see it so they understand the North Star. Where do they want to go? And then when we're doing this, things happen on the fly. So we really need to be able to quickly predict and adjust where we are in this world. We want to make sure that we understand the risks, where things are going to fall out when ad hoc requests come in, and we bring those items in. Where's our waterline? How do we adjust on that? And understanding these story points, understanding what releases are going to occur, what iteration or sprint tickets are going to be delivered in, and the hierarchical view allows us that visibility with structure to get what we need to be able to report out. And again, this is trial and error. How often can we do this? Do we do screenshots? Because, for example, one of the fun things that we learned recently was, hey, we also want moments in time. How do we see this moment versus that moment from ad hoc request or the kind of scope creep that often occurs, right? That is good for our customer and valuable, so let's allow it if we need to. But how do we know what's off versus on? And those are areas that we utilize tools like structure and such to make sure that we have that insight tactically so that we can make decisions when we need to. So right now, what I really want to say is thank you. I hope that was helpful. I saw a lot of questions come in. And so with that, here's my information. One of the comments I do want to make is that the other thing I really have a hard time with webinars is tactically, what do you do next? Especially if you don't have structure, or what do you do next if you don't know what you should handle first? My theory is this: analyze the situation you are in personally. So are you a project manager? Are you managing other teams? How are you handling it? Build out a structure quickly for yourself. Then prioritize those items in there and start producing that view and sending it out and saying, hey, does this work for you? I think that is the crucial component, and the one that we are trying right now a lot, which is, hey, I built this quickly, because building structures and getting this visibility isn't difficult. I built this quickly. What do you think? And that is where I'll end. So thank you guys very much, and I look forward to answering some questions.
In fact, we have a lot of questions, Nathaniel. So, and let me just mention briefly before I start in on the questions, that if we don't get to your question today, or if we don't answer your question sufficiently, maybe we misunderstood the question or for some other reason, please do feel free to follow up on the very last slide today. We'll put up an email address that you can use to follow up with us if you need additional information. So let's jump right into it. Like I said, there are a number of great questions. So I'll start sort of in chronological order. There was a comment first, and I'd like to make a quick comment based on this comment. Joe mentions that he likes the idea of having a personal structure for your own work. I'll just mention very briefly that Nathaniel's not the only one that we've encountered that does this sort of thing. I personally visit with a lot of our customers virtually these days, and I look forward to doing it again in person in the future. And it's a very common thing for people to use structure in that way if they're involved in multiple Jira projects. And I do it myself. I'm involved in 5 or 6 different Jira projects here at ALM Works. And it's how I figure out what I need to do at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the day. So kudos to Nathaniel for doing it as well. I think it's a very common use case.
Yeah, we have found a lot of our teams do that too, so it's fun.
Yeah, it's very common. So the actual first question, the question for you, Nathaniel, is, do you also use structure.gantt?
We do not yet. We've been looking at it, and we're very curious about it. So we have not chosen to pull the trigger on it at this moment, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't in the future. But at this point, no. It is amazing. I have used it in the past, actually. So I should say this. I have used it in the past at a previous company where the team I worked on actually had come up with a lot of really cool use cases for this. And Structure assisted us. We had paid for Structure to come out and train us on how to utilize it. And in those processes, we had that, and I loved it. So I actually recommend it. We have not done it yet because we don't have a use case for that. Right now, we are trying to solve one problem at a time. The mental model I like to tell people is actually on my last slide. If I go back to, excuse me. This is a personal mental model. I call it APP for me. I've been doing it for about 6 years. When I join companies and try to get them to be tactical, I love Agile theory. I love project management theory, but let's be real. What do you do tomorrow, right? And so for me, my mental model that I've built over the years is this: analyze, prioritize, produce, and continually doing that even at my nighttime when I'm getting ready for the next day, or as Dave said, he's doing it too in a different way, every day reviewing his tasks, but really making sure that we analyze, prioritize, and produce tactically every day, not theoretically. So that chart is amazing for that, I think, because you're able to see really good dates and deliver those business values on those dates if your teams have that predictability.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Mike, and Mike asks, how do you handle various teams doing various or different ways of pointing, story pointing, I'm assuming, and roll that up into your portfolio level view?
Oh, it's a great question. So I qualify myself as an Agile purist, but I then get in arguments with Agile Pure. So I'm going to answer my way and say, take off any terms that you put on me because of that, because I don't want to mess anybody else up. For me, I think that most organizations get into a flow where most of the time their user story and pointing will align to some extent if silos are going down. But to be honest, I don't worry about that as much as I worry about what sprints they're going to say they're going to accomplish those user stories in. When you're going into things, yes, I want to know estimation-wise how small or large this is. And yes, I am a horrible agilist in this manner. Yes, I have my Excel document for gear factors that does the quick analysis to say how on or off each team is over their last 6 iterations. Yes, I can play that game, but so can development teams, right? So I try not to do that and instead let their Scrum Master, Engineer, Manager kind of align those things. And for me, I like looking at when the sprint is going to be delivered or their average velocity and how much work they have in their backlog versus just the back and forth. And I think this comes in a lot with dependencies and why that blocked versus blocking view becomes essential for your Scrum of Scrum meetings or your product owner syncs or whatever meeting you may have, is to review that and say, hey, is this ticket going to get done in time for me to take on this next ticket? And those dialogues should happen more naturally as you have visibility and structure to these things.
And I would add one other point there. It's not unusual for people to set up different progress columns in a structure. In fact, I think one of Nathaniel's screenshots had that. So
Yes.
It's not unusual, for example, for a portfolio manager to say, I'm going to use this column for project A's story points and this column for project B's story points. And they do that because they recognize that those teams do things a little bit differently. And
That's a cool way to handle
it. Don't necessarily mean exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's another useful trick that people use, because you can have as many progress columns as you want.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We use 2 progress bars for that, Dave. The other comment I'm going to laughingly say is I have velocity from many teams for many years, agnostic of organizations that I worked at. And it's funny how consistent people find themselves to be without realizing they're consistent. And the argument of, well, this team has a lot different story pointing methodology than this team. When you start looking at the big picture, at least my opinion over 10 years of lots of velocity charts and such, most teams get around the same number as an organization. And that number is technically around 60 story points, oddly enough, with 8 people, 7 people, when you start looking at Scrum. But who cares, right? What you want is predictability for the team, not for me as a project manager. The team should care about their predictability. I just need to know that they're going to deliver what they said they're going to deliver when they think they can by working with other teams, right? I shouldn't be that bottleneck of this gear factor or that gear factor. But at some of the public companies I've worked at, obviously you have capitalizable and operational expenses, and you need to start worrying about those things, but not always.
Okay. So related to the question earlier about structure.gantt, another attendee is wondering if you've also had experience with our structure pages extension, which is a Confluence-oriented extension to structure. Or
I have not, but I really want to.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of use cases we've had that it would be beneficial. But even in the previous company I worked, we did not use it. And I don't have a reason for it. It was just budget, maybe. I don't know. I've never had a purposeful use for that yet. I like out of the box as far as you can go. Because as soon as you start adding other components, it gets messy. And that's actually a big argument I have for most of Atlassian things is stay simple, stay out of the box as much as you can. I could go down that road for a long time, but yeah.
Great. Next question, are there any hooks, and this might actually be more of a question for me, but you can respond too, of course. Are there any hooks in structure that allow you to output to a customer-facing roadmap or a consumer-facing roadmap? Either
that would be cool.
Ability to integrate
Dave?
into other tools. Yeah.
Dave, go. I would love it.
All right. So actually, this is related to a question that Nathaniel asked earlier about exporting to Excel. The answer to the question really is it depends on whether you're on the on-prem platform, Jira Server or Jira data center or the cloud version of Jira. There's differences between the Jira itself and also differences in structure and the structure extensions on the cloud platform. On the server platform and data center platform, we already have export to Excel and hooks, including APIs that allow you to export to many other things as well. On the cloud platform, the product itself is not as mature as the on-prem product, but we do have a very aggressive roadmap, and we're making a lot of investment in our cloud product to make these things possible on cloud as well.
Well,
So
and they haven't limited us yet.
Sorry?
Yeah, and I do want to say, if those are there, it hasn't lost any value. Sorry, because those are not there in the cloud version, we haven't lost value from the tool because of it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But if it was there, we would totally take advantage of it. Just because, again, I like reports. I like everything from a data side that I can get automated, so developers aren't doing things, project managers aren't handpicking and getting updates. Give me a single source of truth, right? And so structure, Jira and structure are that for us, or Jira is, structure is a view of that.
And just an FYI, Daniel, that Excel export capability in the cloud version is coming very soon.
Woohoo! I'll test it all you want.
Next question from Barbara. I'm assuming you'll know what she means here. I guess you used the term targeted in your presentation. Perhaps.
Yes, I did use targeted version. We have a bunch of different versioning, again, for accountability. So when are we aiming for it? When was it hoped for? When was it delivered? Again, to see where things are going off track or on track. Again, that's more for the program and above view. But it's, again, accountability. So only certain people can set certain things for that.
The next question is actually addressed specifically to me, so I'll answer it. And you might want to make a comment as well, Nathaniel. But Gil is asking if we have any plans to create a structured user group. And the answer is yes. Something we plan to do in 2021. In fact, I'm surprised, Gil, we didn't send you, or I didn't send you the survey about that. So there is something that's in the works, and you should look for that in the not too distant future. I can certainly make sure, as a result of you having asked this question, make sure that you're one of the people that knows about that when we start kicking that off. We'll make sure that you know.
And just a quick note, Gil is the gentleman who reached out, and I look forward to chatting with you, Gil. Yes, the wooden figure swag is awesome.
Yeah, that's a comment related to, we have a category of structured users that we think of as structure champions, people who are, they just really know the product inside and out, and they love sharing their knowledge with others. We hope and expect that they'll be an important part of the structure community. And we recently sent our survey respondents something we call the structure bot. So Gil also mentioned in his question that he and his kids love playing with the structure bot. So awesome. Next question from Barbara. Is anyone in your company use on a single sprint structure, or does each team have their own sprints?
Great question. We've tried a few different ways for this. Originally, we were doing, everybody had their same sprints, but because of Jira, it got a little messy. And so what we have now done is sprint name, project team. So every time a team sets up a new sprint, it is the sprint name and the project team after it, just as a terminal or way of saying which team is in which sprint, especially as we are moving some of the ways we manage things into a new, more productive way. I don't know if that answers it, but so yes and no. Everyone is on the same sprint schedule. The naming convention we're now standardizing. Maybe that's the right way to answer it.
And I'll add, Barbara, as I mentioned, I see a lot of customers, and it's a real mix out there. I don't think there's a right answer for this. And especially the larger the organization, the more likely it is people will be working against different sprint schedules. But it's also common in some companies to try to keep everybody on the same sprint schedule, as Nathaniel just mentioned.
So this is right here. You'll see this was the sprint, and now we have added to it or appended to it which team it is as well, since some stories do cross teams as delivery items.
Right, very common. Joe asks, do you restrict the visibility of your structures to certain users, but maybe by team or by role?
I have one that is not visible. I really push against visibility. So my goal would be to have everything open to everyone, but not editable by everyone. There's one view that we have that is not. I like running all teams in Scrum or some type of Kanban Scrum mix. That's why I actually had my third point on the second or third slide called agility, whatever your team runs. Even my team runs Agile. This is something I practiced at my last company massively. Actually, how we came up with our terminology for a PMO was actually named by an individual on this call, Christine, and a few others, who organized the name Business Delivery Team versus PMO for that exact reason, is we really want to make sure that we deliver value, and that means delivering visibility. So yeah, I don't lock down except for one right now.
Next question is from Steve, and I'm actually not I don't know the answer to what I'm about to ask you, Nathaniel. Are you familiar with the SAFe methodology?
Deeply.
Okay,
SPC4, SPC5, yes. I have RTE. Awesome. I got all the certs.
I should have known that because the question indirectly relates to SAFe. Are there any team views that would align to program increments in planning? For example, can teams quickly drag stories across different sprints, similar to what would happen in a PI planning event?
So great question, Steve. And hi, Steve. Steve's a brilliant individual. Right now, no. On-prem, yes. The moment I get that on cloud, yes, you are dead on. The way that I set up before a program increment planning, we don't call them program increments yet because we're just practicing. The way that we set it up is we told everybody the queries ahead of time that would make the right hierarchical view throughout it so that they could check and balance. And then we also had another structure that was our governance to make sure everything was linked correctly. And that's how we did it. But yes, I look forward to drag and drop within that, Steve, because you're right. The linking with dependencies works really well. The sprint schedule works really well, and allowing that drag and drop will be awesome when it gets here.
Yeah, so this is another one of those it depends questions, Steve. If you're using one of the on-prem versions of Structure, you can in fact do that today. If you're using cloud, not yet. But if you are using cloud and you're interested in this kind of capability, we do have a sort of a workaround that works well for most organizations. So until we have that capability in the cloud product, we have another way you can probably accomplish the same goal, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Well, Dave, I would like to jump on that call when you have it with Steve, please.
All right. Joe asks, did you ever put controls on your structures? Actually, I think you just edited this. So who can edit, who can view, who can create?
Yes, for edit, yes, not create. I want everyone to take advantage. In the first few weeks, I think we ran up 20 or 30 right away, and then some people deleted them. We use a lot of structures now, also for history's sake. So closeout, right? What does things look like at this closeout? Now we can go back and see the roll up of last releases, how many story points, bugs, so on.
We're getting towards the top of the hour here, so I'll just mention one more time. All the slide is on the screen. Very quickly, the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, specifically on the webinar archive playlist, maybe by the end of this week, and if not, certainly early next week. You can learn more about Structure at alm.works/structure. And if we didn't answer a question or you have any follow-up at all, feel free to use the email address that you see here. We'll know that you're asking the question because you attended the webinar, and we'll route that question to the right person, whether it's me or Nathaniel or anyone else that can answer that question for you. So let's just take a couple more in the time we have left. Next question is—
May I just say one quick comment, Dave, too?
Sure.
Feel free to reach out. Gil's already taken place of this, but feel free to reach out to me as well. I am always learning. And this is where I say I'm a purist when it comes to Agile. I want input, advice, thoughts from other people, and to argue it in a fun and functional way. So please feel free to reach out. The work information is here, and then my personal website is here as well. So You'll notice I like getting coffee virtually with people, so please feel free to reach out.
Right. Let's do one more question. In your various structures, you showed different columns, Nathaniel. Is there sort of a core set that you find to be most beneficial?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, or for me, actually, as a project manager, I should say, I love progress. So I set both two progresses I shared. One is off of the status category, and then one is off of my own setting of each status and the percent done. Secondly, I love having the sprint. When are these stories going to be delivered? That is a huge one for me for understanding when things are happening and when I should expect things. And are the teams communicating on those blocked and dependent items? Because I shouldn't be the only one making sure those occur. And then oh gosh, if I have to choose. I like assignee, and now I'm really liking my new custom one called status update, which is, again, where people at the end of the day are just adding their latest status so that we have an update of where things are, again, without having to do readouts or me reach out to people. So those would probably be my three if I had to choose them right now to four. But it does change depending on the project, or if I'm looking at a feature, or if I'm looking at an initiative or at the team level. It really depends also what view I need to get into.
So we've reached the top of the hour. I'm going to call it quits there. But as I mentioned, we'll respond to folks whose questions I didn't get to ask Nathaniel via email. You can follow up with us via email if you want to add a question. And Nathaniel, kudos to you and great job. We had nearly all of our attendees stay right to this point. That doesn't happen very often. So that means you are an engaging presenter with lots of great information. So thank you to you. And thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye.